All right, today for the Martin Luther King read, you are joined again by Mr. Chief. This time, he is not in his bed, which is very unusual. He has found a spot on the ground to sleep. He is already bored. He's awake though, so he'll be listening. This is also an activity that you can do with your dogs or pets or cats at home. You can read to them. Instead of just reading in your head all the time, you can read out loud to your dog. They might enjoy it more than Chief leads on. I think deep down he does like it though. Okay, so chapter 3, Martin gets a job. So remember, we're reading who was Martin Luther King Jr. Remember, we are reading about his life. We just left off on him finding his wife and that he wanted to be a minister. Also, I am reading this with permission from Scholastic, so thank you, Scholastic. All right, chapter 3, Martin gets a job. 2 churches, one in Massachusetts and one in New York, wanted Martin to become their minister. While Martin was deciding which job to take, another letter came from the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. The church, which had no minister, invited Martin to come down and preach. He's snoring. Oh my goodness. Chief, do you not like my story? That's so sad. Continuing on. On a clear winter day in January 1954, Martin set out to visit the church in Alabama. On the drive, he listened to one of his favorite operas on the radio. The music in the beautiful countryside made the 4-hour drive pass quickly. During the drive, Martin practiced the sermon he was going to deliver the next day in Montgomery. By the time he got there, he was nervous. He was not afraid to speak in front of people. At his father's church, Martin stood up before crowds and preached. But Martin knew that if his sermon tomorrow was good, the job of the minister would be his. Martin wasn't sure he wanted to live in the South. He knew that the life in the North was easier for blacks and fair. Still, the church in Montgomery sounded like a wonderful place, and he wanted to make a good impression. Should he show the people that he was smart? Should he tell them that about all of his education? No. Martin knew that all he had to do was the same thing he had done before in churches: speak from his heart and help people pray. Sure enough, Martin's sermon was so good that the people at the Dexter Avenue Church asked him to be their pastor. Martin talked with Coretta. She, too, shared Martin's fears. Could she find a good job in the South? In the North, there were more opportunities for black women. Martin and Coretta also talked about what it would be like raising children in the South. In the end, Martin and Coretta decided to live in Alabama. After all, the South was their home, and more importantly, at the Dexter Avenue Church, Martin could help fix some of the problems of the local black people. All right, and then there's a little excerpt about Brown versus the Board of Education. So, around the same time that the Kings decided to move to Alabama, a very important case came before the Supreme Court. In Topeka, Kansas, a black 3rd grader named Linda Brown had to walk a mile every day to get to school. Linda's father tried to enroll her in a school that was closer to home, but the principal refused. The school was for white children only. This case and other cases like it came before the 9 judges on the Supreme Court. On May 17th, are you going to leave us? Chief, you don't want to hear our story? Oh, he's going to stay. This case and other cases like it came before the 9 judges of the Supreme Court. All the 9 judges agreed on the court agreed. All right, action again. So those of you that know me or my kiddos in my class know that Chief is very old. He is 16, so he has trouble getting up, but he has found his bed again, and he is ready to learn. I'm going to make sure that he listens to this whole chapter because it's important. Okay, so we left off on Brown versus the Board of Education, which is happening around the same time that Martin Luther King moves to Alabama. So it started with the girl named Linda Brown who has to walk super far to her school because she is black rather than going to the white school in town. So here's where we left off. This case and other cases like it came before the 9 judges of the Supreme Court. On May 17, 1954, all 9 judges of the court agreed that separate schools by definition could not be equal. With that reasoning, the idea of separate but equal was struck down, and all public schools had to accept black and white children. So that is big news for the movement of civil rights here. So this is all because of this girl who just, her dad didn't believe that that was fair, that she had to walk to school that far. So they decided that separate was not equal. Okay, it struck down that idea. Okay, so we even talked about that before, where they have those two separate water fountains, and just because they're separate doesn't mean that what they're getting is equal. Like we saw the picture of the two different water fountains, right? So that is where we're gonna leave off for today. Tomorrow we'll read chapter 4 called Riding the Bus. Okay, so we'll see you then.